Okay, so good afternoon. This is actually take three for me because I actually just started talking for I think 15 minutes and then realised that the camera wasn't actually recording. So take three. Good afternoon. I'm just going to basically, I hope you're all happy and safe. First of all, and now I'm just going to kind of talk through the assessment for this week. What we're going to do, how we're going to structure it, that kind of thing. All and a couple of notices as well before we move on to the exam skills. So the question for today, by the way, this will be due in, as long as it's kind of in by Tuesday morning, that's okay, because technically Friday is a bank holiday, so I'm not expecting you to do any work on the Friday. So I've just extended the deadline. Still going to release this out on the Friday just for the sake of routine. To be quite honest, I didn't even realise there was a bank holiday until a student sent me a message yesterday saying what's happening with the bank holiday. So, yeah, just totally slipped my mind because I've just basically forgotten what day it is. Anyway, so the assessment for today is outline consensus explanations in the patterns and trends of age inequality. So if we look back to the conflict explanations of ethnic inequality essay you did, it's going to be very similar to that. You just swap out conflict for consensus, you swap out ethnic for age. But let's think about how we're going to structure that, what we might include, that kind of thing. So this is basically a lot of the functionalism and new right stuff that we looked at and over the, not last lesson, but the two before that. So this is how we structure it. Introduction, first of all, as always. Now, with an introduction, we need to throw in the definition of a concept of some kind. Not of some kind, one that's actually relevant to the question. That's all you need to do, okay? Don't add loads of fluff to your introduction because it doesn't get you anywhere in a 20 marker. There's no evaluation, so there's no really need to set up a debate or to summarise the main weaknesses and strengths. Just don't do it. It wastes your time, and it doesn't really award you any marks, so don't bother. Then we need to give three explanations. You need to give explanation 1, explanation 2, and explanation 3. So we can basically kind of go down a number of the studies and stuff that we've looked at. So, for example, let's say explanation 1, I could use Eisenstadt's theory of how the youth need to test the boundaries of society. Now, for each of these explanations, you want to try and attach it to a pattern or trend of age inequality. Remember, it's a 20-mark question, so we need 6 pieces of evidence. Remember that. So the way that we present it is going to be slightly different. So let's say explanation 1, I'm using Eisenstadt. I could attach, I'm just going to put attach evidence here. But I could attach, say, evidence of media portraying the youth as criminal or deviant and say, well, this is very nicely linked to that because, Eisenstadt is basically explaining why it is that the youth are portrayed as deviant or criminal, because they are deviant and criminal from his perspective. And you do that for each one. So then again, so therefore you should have 6 studies in the essay. There we go. So same kind of format as the conflict explanation one. That's potent. Right, so conclusion needs to be very brief, okay? When I say brief, I mean brief. A few of the 20-mark conclusions that I saw were, unsightly long. Some ones was half a page, and you don't want to do that because it wastes your own time. We're trying to kind of make this realistic as to what you can do in the 20 minutes that you've got to do a 20-marker. And if it turns out that you've got some extra time, don't waste that time in throwing loads of waffle in the conclusion, because you could use that time to add some more depth to your explanation. Maybe even throw in another study. You can use that time more wisely. That can get you more marks than a conclusion in a 20 marker, because it's not there's no marks for AO3 in a 20-mark question. And as we know from the assessment outcomes video I did, AO3, a conclusion falls into AO3. So if there's no AO3 marks, you're not really going to get any marks for it. You might get an extra mark for AO1 simply just for the kind of structural tidiness of it, but that's all you're going to get. So a kind of brief summary is all you need in the conclusion. And there you go. That's it. That's the kind of format. Your last essay from last week, I'll be marking over the course of tonight and tomorrow. So you should have it by the end of kind of 5 o'clock Friday or so. By the way, if you've emailed me any essays, my inbox is just a no-go zone at the moment. It's just, I think I must get like an email every minute or so. So it just gets flooded. So I do end up losing a lot of emails, losing a lot of essays. So if I've not marked an essay or given you feedback on an essay that you've emailed to me, the ones on Moodle I should have already kind of marked most of them apart from the most recent one. But if there's one that you feel like I might have forgotten about, just don't hesitate to drop me a line on Teams and remind me. Because aside from just being unable to comprehend the sheer amount of correspondence in my inbox, my brain is also like a sieve. So I will understand if you need to give me a prod. Okay, so what I thought would be a useful exercise today, this is not going to be exciting by any stretch of the imagination, but it will be really useful. This is like knowing the battle plan of your enemy as you go into the exam. It's like knowing what the examiner is trying to pick you up on can help you not fall into any of the traps, to make sure that you're ticking all the right boxes. Think of this as kind of like a driving test. You know that they're going to be looking for certain things. You know that they're going to kind of mark you down for certain things. So if you know those things in advance as you go into the exam hall, you're going to be a huge advantage to everyone else. So what I'm going to do now is talk you through kind of the mark scheme, some of the top bands of the mark scheme. Knowing the mark scheme can be really useful if you want to kind of just write an essay and then mark it yourself, self-reflect. Because as much as you might hate kind of peer marking or self-marking and this kind of thing, because you're kind of always thinking, have I marked it right or not? Everyone thinks that they've marked it wrong, and I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, when I look at someone that's done peer marking or marked it themselves, they've got it right. So really kind of think how you might be able to use these. They can be a really useful tool, as dull as they can be to read and as dull as they can be to use. Because this is how we, as teachers, will think about marking your essays. It's how we try and encourage you to write. So if you know these as much as we do, then there's no reason why you can't get 4 marks every time, really. Knowing what the mark schemes consist of, what they're looking for, is going to be as important, if not more important sometimes, than actually knowing the content, from knowing your Parsons from your Eisenstats and this kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through kind of the top bands for each of the assessment outcomes, what they're looking for, and all this kind of thing. So let's have a look at. I'm going to take a 20-mark scheme simply because you're doing a 20-marker, so this is probably the most useful for you. So generally, if we look at here at the AO1, they're looking for excellent knowledge and understanding. So this is why I encourage you to show kind of a depth of understanding, show the broader understanding of what a consensus or a conflict explanation is. That kind of sets a good knowledge, as we see here in level 3, apart from an excellent knowledge, showing that really deep understanding of the context. An understanding of ways that age is a form of social inequality. Now this is the key thing that we want to be trying to get across in order to hit this top band of the mark scheme. We need to show depth and breadth. So we need to explain things in detail, and we need to show a kind of range of evidence, as we see here. So they've got a range of areas and sociological evidence. So what we can learn from that, if we read that sentence, is that they need detail, they need us to explain in depth, but they also need breadth. So that means that we can't just focus on, say, 1 or 2 studies and just go into massive detail. We need to have more. We also need, as it says there, a range of areas. So, with that, we can think, right, we can't just maybe focus on just the workplace or income. We might have to try and make some links to the media, try and broaden that understanding a bit more. Really showing that you've got a breadth as well as a depth. Breadth being like width and depth being depth. Anyway, it says at the bottom of the level, which we should not be aiming for, they're slightly less developed. What it means when it says it's not developed, it means kind of depth. It means links to the question, this kind of thing. The other thing that I've mentioned this before, and this is kind of a really important part, is that for the top band of AO1, we need a well-developed line of reasoning. I think that this coffee might be a little bit too big. I can kind of feel my heart giving way. Plus, I've also had these 2 as well. So,
just a quick disclaimer, I in no way endorse the excessive consumption of caffeine. The fact that every video includes me imbibing enough caffeine to send a small elephant into a cardiac event is purely coincidental.
This may be my last video. Anyway, so we want the information presented to be relevant and substantiated. So we need to have it all relevant and linked to the question. And for the line of reasoning, that's basically just kind of a logical structure, showing that you're going from point A to point B, relatively logically, not just kind of bouncing all over the place. This is why I encourage you not to just kind of shoehorn in a lot of the essay, not just the 20 markers, but generally, not to shoehorn in loads of theories, because then you lose that line of reasoning. Because, one moment you're talking about Parsons, and you're going off to Marx, and you're going off to Eisenstadt, and, the examiner's just going into a bit of a spin. It's dizzying for him. There we go. Right, form of social inequality. There will be a range of sociological evidence, theories, and concepts. This is for the good stuff. So, in summary, for AO1, we just need a detail, we need breadth, and we need width. We also need it to be kind of logically structured. Now let's look at the AO2, which is kind of the only other one that we need actually for the 20 markers. The candidate shows an excellent ability to apply sociological knowledge. So this is when we might be applying some of those theories to evidence. This is where we're going to show off those application skills. And again, just like with AO1, they're looking for a wide range of material which is explicitly and consistently related to the question. So don't be afraid of linking to the question too often, because there's no such thing. The whole purpose is answering the question. So if you end up kind of linking too much, then that's not really a problem. So make sure we focus on linking to the question as much as we can. You'll also notice on the mark scheme, by the way, if you want to have a read through some of these yourself, and this is also on the website that I showed you last week from the OCR website. So if you can look these up yourself, it does actually show you what you can include in some of the questions. Again, when the examiner gets this, they'll have a list of kind of pre-approved information that might be relevant. Don't be alarmed if some of these you're like, we haven't learnt this, what the hell? Because different colleges will teach different bits, but they're all part of the same spec. So there's no way we could teach you kind of all of this. So we've kind of condensed it in a logical way. So if you want to read through this, that'll be useful, so that you know exactly what we're looking for when we mark yours. Finally then, let's see how much time I've got left before the camera dies. None, as it happens, so I'll have to restart it. Okay, so for the AO3 mark schemes and that kind of thing, I'm going to look to the 40 marker. Makes most sense. There are no AO3 marks in a 20 marker, so this will be useful for when you're doing your next 40 marker, which will probably be next week. Anyway, candidates show an excellent ability to evaluate and analyse the view. This is level 4. This is the 13 to 16 marks. If we're getting into that level 4 band in a 40 marker, you're in A grade territory quite comfortably. So again, there's a few parts in here that we can pick out and make sure that we're addressing. Sustained and explicit evaluative arguments. With this one, we can point out the two parts of that. It has to be sustained, so it therefore has to be throughout the essay. It has to be reflective, it has to be consistently kind of always evaluating the comments that you're making. And it also has to be explicit. That's a very important part. This means that you cannot just present another theory. So let's say I'm talking about the Marxist view of age inequality. I detailed it and then I go, on the other hand, Patterson says, and just leave it there. Though Patterson's host immigrant model can be true at the same time as Burns' Reserve Army of Labour. So you need to say how the two things conflict, where the evaluation is, what's the strengths, what are the weaknesses of each one. Otherwise it's not explicit. You're leaving the examiner to fill in the blanks. And so therefore you're going to kind of drop towards this kind of level 2 band or perhaps low level, level 3. So for level 4, 13, 16 marks, explicit, it needs to be explicit. There will be discussion of different theoretical approaches. So you need to have a kind of wide range of different theories included. Even if it's an essay on, say, functionalism, make sure that you try and evaluate it from another perspective. So a kind of summary of the AO3 stuff. We need to be reflective, it needs to be sustained, it needs to be throughout. And it also needs to be well developed as well. We can see this here. I can't stress this enough. Do try and include studies and evidence in your evaluation. Once you've included that study and evidence, tell me how it therefore contradicts the previous statement. If your conclusions are about this thin, so like say 3 or 4 lines, it should be like that. It should be kind of 3 times that size, at the very least. So they need to be more than kind of like a sentence. Positive evaluations, they can be a little bit briefer. Negative evaluations, less so. So the deadline for this, by the way, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not. I'm a complete state today, I'm sorry. Anyway.
I'm going to speed this up whilst I spend 3 minutes repeating myself.
I love lockdown.